You noticed it too, didn't you? The drive that used to fly 200 yards now stops well short. Same swing, same effort, less ball, and everybody keeps telling you it is just your age. That is the lie I set out to disprove. Because what I found buried in old golf manuals and dusty teaching notes says the yards you lost after 70 were never taken by your body. They were taken by 5 tiny changes in how you stand over the ball, changes that crept in so slowly you never saw them happen. Fix the setup, and the distance comes back before you ever swing faster. That knowledge was written down plainly 70 years ago, then quietly buried under new drivers, new lessons, and new reasons to spend money. I traced it back to a 1957 instruction book and a man who shot his own age at 67. Stay with me and I will hand you all 5, in order, and the last one is the strangest. And before you think this needs a gym membership or a coach, hear me now. Every one of these works standing in your own backyard, for free, this week. It started for me on a cold Tuesday morning last autumn. I was standing on the first tee of the little municipal course I have played for 30 years, and my playing partner, a fellow named Walter who is 74, striped one past me by 40 yards. Walter does not lift weights. Walter walks with a slight limp, and I stood there watching his ball roll, and something in my gut said, that is not strength, that is a secret. So I went home and I started digging, and I did not stop for 4 months. The first thing I did was pull my own game apart, frame by frame. I set up my phone on an old tripod and filmed myself swinging in the garden. Then that night I found an interview with Walter over coffee, and I asked him one flat question. What did you change? He laughed and said he had not changed anything on purpose, but years ago an old pro at a course in the next county had set him up a certain way, and he never touched it since. That was my first clue. Walter was not doing something extra. He was avoiding a mistake the rest of us had drifted into without noticing. So here is where the investigation truly began. And here is the first secret, the one about the ball and where it sits. I went looking for the oldest teaching I could find on ball position for the driver, and I landed on a book from 1957, Ben Hogan's 5 Lessons, The Modern Fundamentals of Golf. Hogan wrote that the ball for the driver should sit off the inside of the lead heel, not the middle of the stance, forward. And here is the part that stopped me cold. When I filmed myself, my driver ball had crept back toward the center of my stance, inch by inch over the years. Almost every older golfer I have since filmed does the same thing. We pull the ball back because it feels safer, because we are afraid of missing it. But that little drift is quietly bleeding your distance. Here is why. The driver is the one club in the bag you are meant to hit, while the club head is traveling upward. When the ball sits back in your stance, you catch it while the club is still coming down, and you deliver a downward glancing blow that spins the ball high and short. Launch monitor testing done at teaching centers over the last 15 years shows the difference plainly. A golfer with a modest swing speed who moves from hitting down on the ball to hitting up on it can gain 20 to 30 yards of carry, same speed, same effort, just a ball sitting forward and a club catching it on the way up. So the fix costs nothing. Move the ball forward until it lines up with the inside of your lead heel. Then tee it higher than you think, high enough that half the ball sits above the top edge of the driver when the club rests on the ground. That alone starts to undo years of quiet loss. And when I made that single change in the garden, I saw it on the phone screen, the ball climbing instead of ballooning. But here is what nagged at me. If this was written down in 1957, plain as day, in one of the best-selling golf books ever printed, why had every one of us forgotten it? Why did the drift happen at all? That question pulled me straight into the second secret. And this is where I first began to smell something wrong. Because the second secret is about your spine, and it is the exact thing that makes the forward ball position work, and almost nobody teaches it to older players anymore. Let me jump ahead for a moment to what I found at the bottom of this, because it explains everything. Somewhere between the old teaching and today, the instruction given to senior golfers quietly changed. It stopped being about how to move the ball forward and up and started being about what new club would fix you for $400. But hold that thought, because I need to show you the spine first, and how I found it. I was reading an even older book on learning golf by Percy Boomer, first published in 1942. Boomer taught kings and champions in France between the wars, and he described something he called feeling the swing as a turn inside a barrel. But the detail that jumped out at me was about the tilt. At address with the driver, the good player's spine leans slightly away from the target, so the trail shoulder sits lower than the lead shoulder. Think about that. If your right hand is lower on the club than your left, and it is, then your right shoulder must naturally sit lower too. Most older golfers fight this. We try to stand level and square because it feels balanced and correct. But standing level with a driver forces you to hit down on the ball, and it jams your body so you cannot turn freely. So I tried Boomer's tilt in the garden the next morning. I set the ball forward off my lead heel, and then I let my trail shoulder drop just slightly, so my head sat a touch behind the ball. It felt strange. It felt like I was leaning back. And the ball came off the face with a sound I had not heard in years, a solid, climbing crack. Here is the practical piece, exactly what to do. Take your normal stance with the driver. Now, without moving your feet, let your lead hand slide up your thigh an inch while your trail hand slides down. That tips your spine gently away from the target. Your nose should sit behind the ball, not on top of it. That is the tilt Boomer described in 1942, and it is what lets you catch the ball on the way up instead of chopping down on it. The evidence kept stacking. Every old book agreed. Every modern launch monitor confirmed the numbers. And yet the two men I trusted most, the old pros who taught in the middle of the last century, had this figured out before the war, and somehow it slipped out of common teaching. That was the moment I stopped believing this was an accident. Somebody somewhere benefited from us forgetting how to hit the ball for free. But I did not have the proof yet, so I kept pulling the thread, straight into the third secret, the one about your feet. Now here is where it gets interesting, because the third secret contradicts almost everything you have been told about a wide, stable stance. I always believed that as you get older, you should widen your stance for balance. Plant your feet. Stay steady. Do not fall over. It sounds like wisdom. It is quietly killing your turn. And I only figured this out because of Walter, my playing partner, the man who outdrove me by 40 yards on that cold Tuesday. I filmed Walter's setup one afternoon, and when I looked at it that night, I saw it immediately. His feet were not planted wide and square. His stance was only about shoulder width, and both of his feet were flared outward, toes turned out like a duck. My feet, by contrast, were spread far apart and pointed dead straight ahead, locked like fence posts. So I went back to the research, and I found the answer in the story of Sam Snead. Snead had one of the smoothest, longest swings in the history of the game, and here is the fact that matters most to you and me. Snead shot his age or better more than once, and at 67 years old he shot a 66 in a tournament. 66 at 67. That is not a young man's body. That is setup and freedom of motion beating age. Snead flared his feet, especially his lead foot, and he kept his stance from getting too wide. Why does this matter so much for us? As we age, the hips and the middle back stiffen. A wide stance with straight feet locks those stiff joints in place and stops you from turning. And if you cannot turn back and through, you have no power source at all. Flaring your feet outward acts like oiling a rusty hinge. It lets your hips rotate on the backswing and clear on the way through, even when the joints are not what they used to be. Here is exactly what to do, and it costs nothing. Bring your feet in until they are about shoulder width apart under the driver, no wider. Then turn your lead foot out toward the target by about 20 to 30 degrees, roughly the angle of 10 past the hour on a clock face. Turn your trail foot out a little too, maybe 15 degrees. That flare unlocks the very turn that age tried to steal from you. When I did this, combined with the forward ball and the spine tilt, the change on the phone screen was not subtle. And that is the honest limit of a video like this one. I can hand you the feet, the ball, the tilt, and you can go feel them this weekend for nothing. But when I put 4 months of digging onto paper, I found there was far more than any single sitting could hold, so I wrote it down properly in 3 short books of my own. One walks the man who lost 40 yards off the tee through 10-minute drills on his own carpet, no gym and no new driver. One takes the death grip apart hand by hand until the release comes back on its own. And one is for the fellow whose irons are digging in behind the ball off tight lies, so he gets ball first contact again. Same buried fundamentals you are hearing right now, only laid out day by day, week by week, so nothing drifts back. If you want the full method, scan the QR code right there on your screen, link in the description, pinned comment. Now, back to the garden, because what I saw on that phone screen led straight to the question that soured everything I thought I knew about the lessons I had paid for. I was suddenly turning behind the ball like I had not done in a decade, and a small, cold thought went through my mind. Nobody ever taught me to flare my feet. Every lesson I ever paid for told me to widen my stance and stay square. Who told us that and why? That question is where the investigation turned dark, and I promised you I would name it. So here it comes. Somewhere in the 1980s and 90s, the money in golf moved. It stopped being in teaching a man to swing and started being in selling him equipment. Think about it plainly. If the old pros could add 30 yards to your drive by moving the ball forward, tilting your spine, and flaring your feet, all for free, in an afternoon, then what exactly is a $400 driver for? What is a $300 lesson package for? The free knowledge was competition for the paid product. I am not telling you clubs do not matter, they do a little. But the industry that grew up around golf had every reason in the world to let the simple, free setup fundamentals fade quietly into the background and to replace them with a message you have heard 1,000 times. You are getting old, your swing speed is dropping, and the only answer is to buy the newest, lightest, most expensive club on the rack. That message sells drivers. The truth, that your setup drifted and you can fix it for nothing, sells nothing at all. So guess which message you heard on repeat and which one got buried. That is why Hogan's forward ball from 1957 and Boomer's spine tilt from 1942 and Snead's flared feet all quietly disappeared from the everyday advice given to men and women over 70. Not because they stopped working, because nobody makes a dollar when they work. And that made me angry enough to keep digging because I wanted to know what else they let us forget. Which brings me to the 4th secret, and this one is about your hands. And it is so small you will not believe it matters until you feel it. The 4th secret is grip pressure, and here is the clue that cracked it open for me. I read an old note attributed to Sam Snead, who said you should hold the club as if you were holding a small bird, firm enough that it cannot fly away, gentle enough that you do not crush it. Hold a small bird. That is the feeling. Now think about what most of us do over 70. We grip the club tighter and tighter every year. We are afraid of losing control, afraid the club will twist, so we squeeze. And when I filmed my own forearms at address, I could see the tendons standing out like ropes. I was strangling the club before I even moved it. Here is why that quietly costs you distance. And the science is clean. When you squeeze the grip hard, you tense the muscles all the way up your forearms and into your shoulders. Tense muscles are slow muscles. Speed in a golf swing comes from the club head whipping and releasing freely through the ball, and a tight grip stops that release cold. Studies on muscle tension and rotational speed all point the same direction. Relaxed muscles fire faster than tense ones. So the harder you hold on, the shorter you hit it. It is almost cruel how backwards that feels. The fix is free and you can do it right now in your chair. On a scale where 1 is barely holding on and 10 is crushing with all your might, most older golfers grip at about an 8 or a 9. You want to be at about a 4. Hold the small bird. When you first try it, you will swear the club is going to fly out of your hands. It will not. What will happen is that your arms will feel loose and heavy, and the club head will start to lag and whip through the ball on its own. When I dropped my grip pressure to a 4, my swing suddenly felt slower, lazier, almost sloppy, and the ball went further. That is the paradox the old pros understood and we forgot. Easy is fast. Tight is slow, But now I have to stop and speak directly to one of you, because I know exactly who is watching right now and thinking this is not for me. Maybe you are on your own. Maybe money is tight and the idea of a golf lesson is laughable. Maybe you do not even belong to a club anymore, and the only swinging you do is in a small back garden or at a cheap driving range on a Saturday when your knees allow it. Maybe you are thinking, this all sounds fine for men with time and money and a foursome, but not for me. I want you to stay right here, because what I found next was built for exactly you, and it does not cost a single penny. Every one of these secrets I tested with no equipment beyond the clubs I already owned and a phone propped against a flower pot. You do not need a coach. You do not need a launch monitor. You do not need a gym, a membership, or a playing partner. You need a club, a small patch of grass, or even a doormat, and 10 minutes. Here is the routine I built, and it is the everyday heart of everything I found. Stand with a club and no ball at all. First, set your feet to shoulder width and flare both toes outward. Lead foot more than trail. Second, place a ball or a coin on the ground off the inside of your lead heel, just so your eyes learn where forward is. Third, let your trail hand settle lower on the grip and feel your trail shoulder drop, so your spine tilts gently away from the target. Fourth, soften your hands until you are holding the small bird, a 4 out of 10, no more. Then just turn back and through, slowly, feeling the freedom. Do that 10 times a day in your kitchen or your garden. No ball, no pressure, no cost. You are grooving the setup that adds the yards, and you are doing it for free, alone, on your own schedule. I did this every morning while the kettle boiled, and the strangest thing happened. The setup that felt so foreign in week 1 felt completely natural by week 3. My body remembered something it had been talked out of decades ago. That is when I knew I was close to the bottom of this. Because if these 4 things could come back so quickly once I stopped fighting them, then the real secret was never that they were hard. The real secret was that they were hidden. And there was one more, the 5th, and it is the one that ties all the others together, the one I found last, in the most unlikely place. Here is how I found the final secret. I had been reading everything I could about old teaching, and I kept seeing references to a slim little book called The Little Red Book by Harvey Pennock, published in 1992. Pennock taught golf in Texas for more than 60 years, from the 1920s onward, and he wrote down his lessons in small notebooks he kept private for most of his life. Champions came from all over to learn from him, and buried in his teaching was a piece of advice about the takeaway that changed everything for me. But the 5th secret itself is not about the swing. It is about a tiny move you make before the swing even starts. And almost every great senior player did it, and almost no one teaches it anymore. It is called the forward press, joined with one more thing, dropping the trail foot back to close the stance just slightly. Let me explain both, because together they are the payoff for watching this far. The forward press first. Just before you take the club back, you make a small, soft movement of your hands slightly toward the target, and then let them rebound into the backswing. It is like the gentle bend of a diving board before the jump. Sam Snead did it. Many of the great old players did it. Why does it matter so much for us over 70? Because the hardest moment in an aging golf swing is starting it from a dead stop. Stiff muscles hate starting from frozen. The forward press gives you a running start, a tiny bit of motion that flows into a fuller, freer turn. It removes the jerk, the lurch, the stiffness of beginning cold, and then the closed stance. Here is the discovery that finished the investigation. When I looked back at every long-hitting senior I could find footage of, Snead among them, their trail foot was pulled back from the target line just an inch or two, closing the stance. That small drop of the trail foot does one magnificent thing for an older body. It pre-clears the hips before you even move, giving you room to make a bigger shoulder turn on the way back. A bigger turn is a bigger arc, and a bigger arc is more clubhead speed, and more speed is more yards. It is the mechanical trick that gives a stiff 70-year-old back the turn of a younger man. Here is exactly how to put the whole thing together, the complete setup that 4 months of digging handed me. Feet at shoulder width, both toes flared out, Pull your trail foot back an inch or two to close the stance. Ball forward off the inside of your lead heel, teed high. Trail hand low, trail shoulder low. Spine tilted gently away from the target so your nose sits behind the ball. Hands soft, holding the small bird at 4 out of 10. And to begin, a small forward press of the hands, then let it rebound into a full free turn behind the ball and swing up through it. The first time I did all 5 together, on the range on a gray Saturday morning, I hit a drive that carried further than anything I had struck in 5 years. And I want to be honest with you about how that felt, because it was not joy exactly. It was closer to grief, because I realized how many years I had spent believing I was simply getting old and weak, when the truth was I had been quietly talked out of 5 free fundamentals that my grandfather's generation knew by heart. That is the whole of it. The forward ball from Hogan in 1957, the spine tilt from Boomer in 1942, the flared feet and the soft grip and the forward press from Snead, who shot a 66 at 67 years old, the closed stance and the takeaway wisdom from Pennock, who wrote it in a little red notebook he kept for 60 years before he let the world read it in 1992. These are not tricks somebody invented last year to sell you something. They are the recovered fundamentals of the men who played the longest and the best, preserved in a handful of old books, waiting on a shelf for someone to go looking. I went looking, and now you hold it too. Here is what I want you to feel walking away from this. The yards you thought age stole from you were not stolen by your body. They were quietly set down, one small drifted habit at a time, and the good news that no one selling you a driver wanted you to hear is that you can pick them back up for free this weekend in the clothes you are wearing right now. You are the kind of person who hears a story like this and does not just nod and forget it. You are the kind who tests it, who trusts the evidence over the sales pitch, who refuses to be told they are helpless just because of a number on a birthday card. That is exactly the person these old pros were writing for, whether they knew it or not. So let me ask you one thing directly, and I do want you to answer me in the comments, because I read them, and this is how we teach each other. Which of the 5 surprised you most? The forward ball position, the spine tilt away from the target, the flared feet, the soft small bird grip, or the closed stance with the forward press? Tell me which one you are going to try first. And tell me where you are watching from, because I am always amazed at how far this reaches. If you have ever felt that the simple things in life quietly got more complicated and more expensive for no honest reason, then you belong here, because that is exactly what we dig into, together, one buried secret at a time. Follow along and stay with me, because the next thing I am investigating is even stranger. I found an old note that suggests the reason your short putts started sliding past the hole after 70 has nothing to do with your eyes or your nerves, and everything to do with one thing you were told to do with your feet on the green. I traced it to a teaching from the 1960s, and once you see it, you will never stand over a putt the same way again. But that is a thread for next time. Now, this video showed you the first secret, but inside my membership, the Wiser Living Circle, I pick up right where we stopped and walk you through all 5 fixes on video. And if something isn't clear, you can ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You won't be doing this alone. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time with one click. Now that your setup is dialed in, let me show you something on the greens. This next one will fix your putting for good, so you'll never need another lesson. It's starting right here.